my sister said. You're just jealous because no one likes you. And everyone laughed. I didn't reply, I just quietly transferred the house title to my name, then they all. The silence after she said it didn't last long, just enough for the weight of her words to settle in my chest like a brick. You're just jealous because no one likes you. And then came the laughter. First hers, loud and triumphant, practically vibrating off the walls of my parents' living room, then my cousin Jake's snorting cackle, then Aunt Linda's nasal wheeze. Even Dad cracked a smile behind his glass of bourbon. I didn't respond. I just blinked once, twice, then picked up my glass of water and took a slow sip. The condensation trailed down my fingers, cold and grounding. Everyone else at the table was still chuckling, leaning in toward each other, as if my humiliation was some shared family joke. And maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. My sister, Megan, had always had a talent for theatrics. She could turn the most benign moment into a stage performance. And in our family, loud usually meant right. I was never loud. Never good at the witty comebacks. Never the favorite. She was the one who got the graduation party when she barely scraped through community college. I got a firm handshake and a "keep it up" when I finished my MBA. She lived in my parents' house rent-free with her fiancé and their yappy Pomeranian. I got reminded monthly about pulling my weight, even though I was the one quietly footing the property tax and utility bills. Megan's joke landed hard that night, but not for the reasons she thought. It didn't hurt because it was true. It hurt because she was right about something else. They didn't like me. Not really. They tolerated me. I was the responsible one. The fixer. The background character. The guy who was useful when something needed to be signed, paid, or fixed. But liked? No. Liking someone required acknowledging them first. So I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't even look at her. I just finished my drink, excused myself from the table, and went home. And the next morning, I made a phone call. The deed transfer was already in motion, it just needed my signature. The first real sign that things were shifting came 3 days after that dinner, when I got a call from my sister asking why the thermostat wasn't working. She was annoyed. Said it was freezing in here. As if I were the building superintendent and not, technically, her older brother. I've been calling Dad all morning, she added. He said to ask you? I told her I'd look into it and hung up. I didn't. That morning, I walked into the county records office and signed the final set of papers. The house, already left to me in my grandfather's trust years earlier, was now solely and legally mine. I'd been listed as co-owner with my father, until further notice. A clause my grandfather, sharp as broken glass, had insisted on when he saw how things were going with Megan even back then. I had never acted on it. Not until now. I didn't tell anyone about the final transfer. I didn't gloat or post about it or make a scene. That wasn't my way. Instead, I made photocopies. One for each person currently living in the house. Megan and her fiancé, Tyler. My parents, even though they were technically just staying there temporarily after selling their condo last spring. And my cousin Jake, who had been in between jobs for the past 14 months and was sleeping in what used to be my childhood bedroom. I slid each notice into a large manila envelope and mailed them, formally, certified, with delivery confirmation. No texts. No phone calls. No explanations. The notice was simple. This is to inform you that effective immediately, all occupants currently residing in the property at 287 Greenwood Lane must vacate within 45 calendar days. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Thomas E. Grant, legal owner. A week passed. Then the call started. First, it was my mother. Tom, what's this letter you sent? Is this a mistake? No, Mom. It's not. Silence. But we live here. You were staying here. Temporarily. Remember? She scoffed. This is Megan's doing, isn't it? What did she say to you? Nothing, I said. She said enough, a long time ago. Then Megan called. What the hell is this, Tom? Eviction? Are you out of your mind? 45 days. If you need help finding a place, I can recommend a good agent. You think you can do this? You think this makes you some kind of winner? No. Just the legal owner. She screamed, literally screamed. Called me cruel, heartless, petty. And maybe I was. Maybe I had finally reached the point where mercy wasn't an option anymore. I listened quietly, then hung up. And that's when the real unraveling began. The front lawn looked different that morning. All the cars were still there. Megan's scratched-up Jeep, Dad's ancient pickup, Tyler's ridiculous little convertible. But the mood had shifted. You could feel it before you even stepped onto the porch. The front door was already open when I arrived. My key still worked, of course. I hadn't changed the locks yet. Not yet. That came later. Megan met me at the threshold with her arms folded and her jaw set like stone. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from lack of sleep. She hadn't expected me to show up. She certainly hadn't expected me to look calm. I hope you're proud of yourself, she snapped, before I could even step inside. You've turned this whole house into a war zone. I didn't flinch. It was never peaceful, Megan. You just never noticed because it always worked in your favor. Tyler stood behind her with a mug in his hands and a look of half-interest, half-panic. My dad was sitting in the recliner, my grandfather's recliner, the one he used to nap in after gardening, staring at the television like it held answers to questions he refused to ask aloud. Mom wasn't in sight. I brought copies of the deed, I said, pulling the folder from my briefcase. So everyone can see there's no mistake. It's in my name now. Fully. No one moved to take the folder. I'm not asking you to like it, I added. I'm asking you to leave. Where are we supposed to go? Tyler asked, voice low, like he hadn't quite decided whose side he was on yet. There's a motel off of Route 9, I replied. Clean enough. And I hear their breakfast is better than anything Megan ever cooked. That got a snort from my dad. Megan turned on him. Are you seriously laughing right now? He's kicking us out. Dad just shrugged, suddenly very interested in tightening the cap on his water bottle. What did we ever do to you, Tom? She said, stepping closer. Seriously. What is this even about? I looked at her. I mean, really looked at her. At the designer sweatshirt she hadn't paid for. At the nails that looked freshly done, on what money, I couldn't imagine. At the girl who had mocked me in front of the entire family just 2 weeks ago, without hesitation or regret. You want to know? I said. It's about the time you laughed when I told you I was struggling in college and needed a co-signer. It's about the time you accidentally told people I'd been fired, when I hadn't. It's about every dinner where I paid, and you rolled your eyes. Every family photo where you insisted I stand in the back. Every single moment you reminded me I wasn't wanted. It's about all of it, Megan. She opened her mouth to argue, but there was nothing left to say. Not really. 41 days left, I said, and turned to leave. I could hear her say something as I stepped back out onto the porch. But I didn't catch it. Didn't matter anymore. I expected resistance. I expected shouting, bargaining, guilt-tripping. What I didn't expect, what no one ever expects from people who think they can't lose, was silence. Days passed. No calls. No apologies. No suitcases by the door. The house stood exactly as it had, cluttered, loud, ungrateful. But the people inside had started to walk differently. Quieter. Like they could feel the floor shifting beneath their feet. On day 6, I changed the locks on the garage and the backyard shed. Nothing drastic. Just a start. Dad came out while I was working on the garage door. He stood with his arms crossed, wearing a fishing hat he never used for fishing. This is petty, he said, voice low. Is it? I answered, not looking up. Petty is laughing when your son gets humiliated at dinner. Petty is staying silent when your daughter makes someone feel like trash. This, I turned and met his eyes. This is consequences. He didn't argue. Just grunted and shuffled back inside. On day 10, Megan tried a different approach. She left a note on the kitchen counter. Hey! I know things got tense. Maybe we could talk? Just us? No lawyers. No papers. Just brother and sister. I folded it neatly and dropped it into the recycling bin. Then I boxed up the antique silverware, the same set my grandmother had left behind in her will. It was supposed to go to me, but Megan claimed it belonged to the family. Funny how that word, family, only came up when something valuable was at stake. That afternoon, I drove the box to an appraisal office downtown. The set was worth more than I thought. I sold it on the spot. The money went straight into the lawyer's retainer. That night they finally cracked. Megan cornered me in the hallway, angry again, which meant the sympathy act had failed. You think this makes you strong? She spat. This power trip of yours? No, I said. It makes me free. She laughed bitterly, then looked around the hallway like it might somehow rise to her defense. You were always the weird one, she said. Always off. Now you're just showing everyone why no one ever invited you anywhere. I tilted my head. And yet you're still standing in a house you don't own, asking a man you don't respect for time you haven't earned. That shut her up. She turned, slammed the door to her room. I went back downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table alone. That silence I always used to hate? I savored it. Day 13. I hand-delivered the formal notice to vacate. 1 copy for each room. Megan's fiancé, Tyler, actually thanked me, said it was refreshing to be treated like an adult. Megan tore hers in half and screamed at the hallway. Mom didn't say anything. Just sat at the kitchen table, clutching her tea like it could protect her. She looked tired. Not old, tired. Like she'd finally realized the rules had changed and there was no going back. Dad muttered something about lawyers ruining families. I nodded. Sometimes it's not the lawyer. Sometimes it's the father who watched it all happen. And then I left. I heard Megan crying behind the closed door that night. But for the first time in years, I slept soundly. By day 17, they started packing. Not openly, quietly, shamefully. The way people do when they're still hoping someone will stop them at the door and say, "No, no, stay. We didn't mean it." But no one said that. Megan's makeup shelf disappeared from the upstairs bathroom. Tyler began carrying boxes to his car at night. I watched from the living room window, not hiding, not gloating, just observing. Mom tried one last time. She cornered me by the laundry room, eyes glassy, voice gentle. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "We're still your family." I folded a towel. "Were we, when you laughed with them?" Her mouth opened. Then closed. I walked away. That night, I changed the Wi-Fi password. Printed a new list of utilities. Crossed off everything I'd been paying for the past 3 years. Let them see the world without me holding it up. By day 24, the atmosphere in the house had curdled. Every conversation was either whispered or sharp. The laughter, constant background noise before, had vanished. Even the Pomeranian had stopped yapping, as if it, too, sensed the gravity of what was happening. I came home from work one evening to find Tyler in the living room, standing beside 3 cardboard boxes labeled with Sharpie, kitchen, closet, misc. He looked up at me. Not with anger. Not even embarrassment. Just a quiet sort of resignation. "We'll be out by the end of the month," he said. I nodded. "That's appreciated." He lingered, like he wanted to say more, then thought better of it. Picked up the kitchen box and disappeared down the hall. Megan didn't speak to me anymore. Not directly. But I could hear her behind doors. Hear her fighting with my mother. Crying, yelling, blaming everyone but herself. One night I stood in the hallway outside her room, not listening on purpose, just pausing. She was sobbing. I thought he wouldn't actually do it. She whispered. Mom mumbled something back I couldn't make out. Then Megan, bitter and small. He was always supposed to be the loser. He was always the weird one. The quiet one. He wasn't supposed to win. That made me smile. Because this wasn't about winning. It never had been. It was about being heard. It was about them finally seeing the life they built on me, on my silence, my forgiveness, my stability, begin to crack. When I went back downstairs, I noticed Dad's golf clubs were gone from the hallway. The man who once told me, "You're just not cut out to be a leader," had quietly loaded them into his car the night before. They were going. No apology. No real reckoning. Just a slow drip of realization. And honestly, that was enough. By day 30, I began to take the house back, not legally, not on paper, but spiritually. It started with the study. The study had always been my grandfather's sanctuary, and later my father's clutter zone. A room that had once smelled of leather, cedar, and old pipe smoke had turned into a dumping ground for unopened bills, broken lamps, and boxes labeled "Megan's wedding stuff, don't touch." I cleared it out in a single day. Every unpaid invoice they'd ignored while I quietly covered their debts, I scanned and shredded. Every knick-knack Megan left behind to mark territory, gone. The faded family portraits came off the wall. I replaced them with framed blueprints, black and white photographs, and a small shelf of books my grandfather had left me in secret before he passed. By the time I was done, the room breathed again. On day 33, I tackled the kitchen. No more overcrowded counters, mismatched mugs, expired snacks with my name scratched off. I scrubbed everything top to bottom. Tossed the chipped wine glasses Megan insisted were vintage. Cleaned out the fridge so thoroughly you could hear the hum of the compressor again. When Mom wandered in and saw the bare counters, she blinked like she didn't recognize the place. She tried to say something. Maybe to spark conversation. Maybe to claim some small piece of familiarity. But the words never came. I poured myself a cup of coffee and walked out without a word. By day 36, Megan had fully retreated into her room. The door remained closed all day. No shouting. No performative anger. Just quiet. The kind that wasn't peaceful, the kind that was afraid. Tyler moved faster now, packing boxes with the swiftness of someone trying to outrun shame. I think he understood something Megan never would, that it had never been about revenge. It was about restoration. Of space. Of power. Of self. On day 38, I changed the locks. Left their new keys in labeled envelopes, resting on the table beside the thermostat she once called stupid and old. It wasn't a punishment. It was protocol. The same way you reset things after a long storm. And that's exactly what it had been. A storm. Years of emotional erosion. Years of being the dependable one. The invisible one. The brother who was useful, but never important. The son who was dependable, but never loved. But the house was mine now. And for the first time, it felt like it. Day 45. I woke early, before sunrise, and stood barefoot in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee, watching the light creep over the backyard fence like it was too polite to barge in. It was quiet. Not the fragile, uncertain quiet that had filled the house in recent weeks, but a deeper kind. The kind that settles after a long war ends, and both sides retreat to count their wounds. They were supposed to be gone by noon. I didn't rush them. I didn't need to. The house was already expelling them on its own, room by room, hour by hour. By 9 a.m., my father's truck was packed. He didn't say goodbye. Just walked past me in the hallway without eye contact, carrying a box of loose fishing reels and half-folded jackets. I watched him struggle to close the truck bed and thought about all the times I asked him for help fixing things, and how often he'd waved me off with a "figure it out yourself." So I let him. At 10:17 a.m., my mother emerged with a wheeled suitcase and a laundry basket balanced on her hip. No makeup. No performative sadness. Just tired eyes. She stopped in the foyer, like she expected a final conversation. And I gave her one. "I want you to know," I said softly. "This didn't have to happen." She nodded once. "I know." But she didn't apologize. Not for taking sides. Not for the years of standing silent. And I realized then, she never would. She stepped out into the morning light without looking back. That left Megan. Of course. Always last. Always dramatic. At 11:41 a.m., she descended the stairs wearing sunglasses, indoors, and dragging 2 designer suitcases like she was exiting a bad hotel. Tyler was already outside, waiting by the car, engine running. She didn't look at me. Just reached the front door, paused, and said, without turning around, "You didn't have to be so cold." And I almost said something. Almost. But then I remembered the night she stood in front of 10 people, family, friends, strangers, and laughed at me like I was an unpaid intern in her performance. I took a deep breath and replied, "I was polite. That's more than I ever got." She hesitated, hand on the doorknob. Then she left. No slamming. No tantrum. Just gone. I locked the door behind her. Changed the last lock on the list. Then I walked through the house, room by room, like I was meeting it again for the first time. It felt bigger somehow. Not because of square footage, but because it no longer echoed with the weight of people who didn't value it, or me. That evening, I made myself dinner. Just for one. I lit a candle. Turned on the old jazz station my grandfather used to love. I sat at the head of the table, my table, and ate in silence. Not loneliness. Peace. There was nothing left to reclaim. They had all left. And I had finally arrived. It's been 6 months since they left. The house feels different now, not just in how it looks, but in how it listens. It doesn't flinch anymore. The walls don't echo with criticism or careless laughter. They just breathe with me. It's strange, the things you start to notice when you're finally alone. I've discovered that the floorboards in the hallway creak a little when it rains. That my grandfather's study gets the best light around 3 p.m. That I like reading with the windows open, even when it's cold. Small things. Ordinary things. But they feel sacred now. People ask me if I feel guilty. No. I don't. Not for a second. Because what I did wasn't cruel, it was necessary. See, for years I played the role they gave me. The quiet one. The extra. The background support beam they leaned on without ever stopping to check if I was cracking. And I let them. Because I thought love meant patience. Endurance. Sacrifice. But I've learned something since then. Love without respect is just obligation dressed in disguise. And family without accountability? That's just a slow, silent erosion of self. I don't hate them. I don't need to. What I needed was space, and now I have it. What I needed was voice, and now I've used it. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt like I did, overlooked, undervalued, used, hear me clearly. You are not wrong for asking for more. You are not cruel for demanding boundaries. And if the people around you only love you when you're quiet, that isn't love at all. It takes strength to speak. But it takes power to act. I don't know what will happen between us next. Maybe nothing. Maybe someday they'll see what they lost. Maybe they won't. But I've stopped waiting for apologies. I live my life in a home I reclaimed, in peace I earned. And that's more than enough.